Hello everyone, my name is Ian McIntyre and I'm the head of growth here at Roga. I'm here today with our CEO, bringing to you the very first episode of the Roga podcast. It's exciting to welcome our CEO on today. I just want to give you a little bit of information, given it's the first episode, on what this podcast is and what Roga is, just to give you a bit of context. So, as many of you may know by now, Roga is a company very early in its journey on building a device that allows you to de-stress. We have been working as a team undercover for about 2.5 to 3 years now, and have been together also coming along on our journey, dealing with our own stress and burnout, coming out of our experiences in the pandemic and prior as well in the corporate and the tech world. Our mission as a group of people and as a company is both to destigmatize the experiences like that we've had, but also that many people in the world have currently and have had, of being burned out, of being really stressed out, and that affecting their well-being, their quality of life, and their work. Together, we're currently working on launching a product in that space, our very first product, one of many over the future that we'll be releasing. And that first product is both a hardware and software product that you can use to de-stress and improve your well-being. This podcast is the very first in a series of podcasts that we'll be releasing every couple of weeks. We're going to start by interviewing the people who are in the executive of Roga, including Alison and Ami, the original co-founders, and some of the heads of the different departments, including myself, talking about our work, how we personally came to do this work together, what inspired us, what our visions are, and what we're doing at the moment. Obviously, I want to encourage you to bear in mind that nothing in this podcast is medical advice. And although we're talking about things that are going to border on some medical issues, we are not here to give you specific medical advice. You should definitely consult your doctor if you have any symptoms or conditions in that light. The topics that we are going to discuss are going to be very personal as well. And so I'm going to be encouraging all of the executives of Roga and the other people that we interview over time, from users of Roga to experts in the space, to be sharing those experiences as a way of helping you understand in the general public that this experience of stress, anxiety, and all of the other kinds of things that come along when you're burned out are really normal, and how we can all work on that with different experiences in mind. So we're going to get started, and it's a pleasure today to welcome our very first podcast guest. This is Ami Lebendiker. Hi, Ami. How you doing?
Hey, Ian. Thank you for starting this. Very excited to be here.
So Ami's journey is a really inspiring one, and I want to get to that as quick as possible. But Ami, why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about who you are, how you came to be working at Google a couple of years ago?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about my history. I'm originally Costa Rican. I was made in Israel and grew up in Costa Rica. I've been living in 7 different countries by now. So a bit of a world traveler, and I ended up in California in the last 6 years or so. I went to different countries and different schools abroad, and that actually led me to the opportunity to work at Google, which was always in my dream list. I'm a bit of a gadget freak when it comes to everything regarding helping people and creating cool wearables and hardware. So that's what I did at Google for many, many years.
And I think you've been in the US now for more than 5 years, right?
Yeah, it's about 5-6 years now in the US, all in California, thanks to the job at Google that allowed me to move here. I started with them in Europe, in England, then I moved to Poland, spent a few years there, and then I moved to the US, where I started working in the Google hardware team, where we launched the Google Home, as well as the Pixel phones. Those are the biggest products that I helped bring to market.
Yeah, interesting. You've definitely got a lot of international experience compared to what I think a lot of professionals get in their early careers these days. But I know for a fact, having known you for a couple of years now, that you also had a really tough time at different times in that journey. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely very exciting to be working at a company as big as Google and doing like new stuff, like launching new phones and new gadgets with them. It was also very hard and challenging to be working in trying to compete against companies like Apple and Samsung and Amazon and all at the same time. So definitely a very stressful environment, very startup kind of environment within a big corporation. And as I started getting more and more responsibility and growing throughout my career at Google, then definitely the decision making and um, yeah, just the situation got much more stressful as I got more and more responsibilities.
Something that I think a lot of young people run into, particularly very ambitious, hardworking young people. Do you think you got close to burning out or having any serious medical conditions or anything?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I thought it was, just regular stress, something that, it happens to everyone, especially because I was working on a free time zone. I was working with Asia Pacific and Europe and the US as a whole, and trying to bring to market new stuff and just very challenging work and very tough decision making. So I feel like at some point I was working um, very long hours and started to deprioritize my mental health. Very quickly, that starts to generate more and more mm, complex, just barriers on your life. So specifically when it comes to a relationship with other people and actually getting the best performance out of your work when you are in a place where your mental health is not a priority, then very quickly everything starts coming down.
Mm. But knowing you for a while now, I know you're a really proactive person. You're always doing something. So I imagine that, day to day, you were making a lot of effort to kind of be in a good space.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things that I try to do. At some point it started getting very intense. The stress got very intense. I had a few panic attacks within even meetings. um Definitely working long hours and not taking care of myself and also not talking about it with anyone was a problem. So I proactively started looking for help. I went to a doctor, I went to a psychiatrist. I got diagnosed with clinical anxiety and severe stress, and so I started taking medication as well as going to therapy, and that was quite a long time. I had to. That's something that probably a lot of people in the U.S. are very familiar with, but when you go to a doctor, a practitioner, it's so simple for them to just prescribe medication, even though the consequences might be very different for everyone. So I didn't do a ton of research when I started going into it. I just, I was in such a bad place that I would do anything to function. And also, I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to go down in my performance. I, for at last, had a job that I really liked, and I wasn't really performing to the expectations of it. So I started doing whatever the doctor said.
I definitely want to hear a lot more about what that experience was like. But, something I think it comes to mind a lot of young people who are really experiencing this kind of burnout for the first time is, why did I never know that I could get like this before? Is this like a situation that you
Yeah.
never ran into before in your life?
Yes, that definitely had happened before, especially when there's a lot of I think the word is shame around it, where you are doing something that you know you want to do, or you're doing something that you've worked so hard to get at, and and then you can't really enjoy it or perform to I don't know. We sometimes, especially overachievers, very hard with ourselves, and putting a lot of really tough uh, thresholds that we need to meet, and if we don't meet those, then we feel really bad about it. And I think that probably a lot of people will relate with that as well. So I definitely think that it's something that needs to be taken that people need to take into consideration. That especially when you're really hard with yourself and not meeting, um, you know, all the thresholds and the goals that you put for yourself, and then you pretty much punish yourself for it. So there's a lot of shame around it, and that's why it was so hard for me to talk to it with friends, to talk to it to family, to talk especially with my boss. I was also afraid of maybe getting fired because I wasn't being able to cope with it. So it's something that I really didn't talk much about with anyone.
Yeah, thanks for sharing such a deep and personal kind of experience, and acknowledging out loud what I think many of us really struggle with, that makes us not talk about this, which is that shame. Imposter syndrome is obviously a big topic of conversation. It sounds like you were kind of in your dream job. What was it like dealing with and trying to find solutions at that time in your life?
So I think I think he was. I thought it was going to be pretty simple, given the fact that I had a really good insurance working for a big company, and I believe that the and the doctors knew what they were doing. But it was extremely hard. There were so many issues with it. I was surprised, especially coming from. I've had health insurance, and I've dealt with this in 7 different countries, and I've never encountered anything like in the US. So first of all, it was really hard to find an in-network practitioner that would fit with everything that the insurance was covering. Out of network was all out of pocket, so I would have to go to the in-network ones, which in some cases were not close to me. I would have to drive to them, and then in order to get the prescription, I would had at the beginning have to go every 2 weeks to the doctor to get a prescription, and then after that once a month. And every time you go to the doctor, you still have a copay. So it's very very annoying that every time you go, you still have to pay. And then when you buy the medicine, you also have to copay at the pharmacy. Um, on top of that, there is of course the therapy, which in most insurances is it's the doctors and the practitioners that are in network for psychology CBT therapy are not necessarily the best ones, and the ones that are out of network, which are the best ones, are quite expensive, and even the ones that are in network, you still have to copay. Also, there's a whole it's a plethora of side effects that of course medication brings along, that I wasn't aware of. I started having to take. This is very ironic, but you actually have to start taking medication for the side effects, especially when it comes to blood pressure, and I had a lot of stomach issues, so I had to start taking other type of medication to supplement for the side effects, and those are ironically not covered by the insurance. So I was paying more for the side medication for that for the actual anti-anxiety medication. So that all compounded, there's also side effects of taking time out of work, driving, going back and forth to therapists, finding a therapist. And I have a pet. I know a lot of people in California do as well, so who takes care of my pet while I'm away? So at some point I was ranking up close to $1,000 a month on top of my insurance, which is crazy. The fact that even with a good insurance, you still have to pay hundreds of dollars to 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 treat severe stress and other stuff, anxiety and so forth. So I started to look for other alternatives. That I got to the point where like this can't be really it. Like there must be a better way. There is also no education whatsoever. You have to just go on your own on YouTube and like rabbit holes in Reddit and Discord to understand what all this medication would do to you and what's the best way to treat it. And in some cases, some of the doctors might not even know. They would just prescribe yet another one instead, if the first one wasn't working. Also,
Mm.
finding a good therapist was really hard. I had to go through like multiple ones. So yeah, it's just a really really hard process that took months and months of work.
I'm sure a lot of people hearing this are hearing, their same experiences echoed. I mean, to be clear with everyone, I think I personally can attest to the fact that, I mean, you're a really healthy person, constantly out and active. you're getting into
Yeah.
nature, you're eating well, you have a pet, you live in, a pretty nice city where you've got space. I know you go to the beach a lot and stuff like that, right? And yet you're, working this really hard job, really struggling with stress, and then have to go on above and beyond to try and look after yourself with all of these medical and other inputs, right? So I guess that's the time at which you started to think about there needed to be a better way.
Yeah, and also it affects everyone. It's very contagious. Like when you have stress, everyone around you perceives it. So like I started isolating from friends, from family, from loved ones, and just getting into my own cave. And that's the moment where I decided to like start looking for other stuff. The medication, I know it has its time and place, especially for the short term, and for very very severe cases. I think it could be useful, but not for everyone. Not definitely not the way that is being prescribed in the U.S. And also, nobody tells you how hard it is to quit and how hard it is to get off of him. So for me, the journey was the medication was not really helping, just because it just got me into a zombie mode. I wasn't really feeling anything, no, not stress, but also no joy, and I
Mm,
wasn't myself. I really couldn't function well, so I wanted to get off. In tampering off medication is really hard, so anyone out there who's thinking about it, make sure that you do your research before you start. Hard withdrawal symptoms are really really complicated to deal with, so make sure you have you do your research when you start this
mm,
process. But essentially I started looking for alternatives. I saw, and because I am a geek for hardware and gadgets, and I've been doing it for 10 years, then I started looking into that specific segment, and I encounter an incredible world of alternatives when it comes to mental health.
mm. And I know that's your journey as someone who's really tried to take it on. But something you and I often talk about, right, is just the fact that the statistics are horrible in terms of the number of people who are just silently struggling with these things in the US. I'm sure you know plenty, just like I do. Yeah.
There is, yeah, the CDC puts it at about 67% of the people dealing with stress and anxiety are not treating it, mainly because of the pains that it involves, which is, one, is very costly, as I just mentioned. And I actually had to go through all of this pain. So it's very costly, it's very time consuming, it's very scary, especially when you start taking medication. Then there is still a lot of stigma around it. I wasn't really talking about it with many people. I think the pandemic started to open people's mind about it, but those four main problems are still a pain for people suffering from anxiety. And whomever is listening to this and dealing with stress and burnout, I want you to know that I have complete empathy. I know the place you're coming from. Sometimes it's really hard to get off of that, and like it's an extremely courageous thing to do, to get off and out of that dark pit, and look for help. So I commend you, if you're out there and looking for help. It's the first thing to do.
And likewise, thank you for sharing your, very delicate and personal journey through this stuff. I'm sure you've felt a lot of stigma and stuff being at your dream job and struggling that much, right?
Yeah, at some point it got to a point where I wasn't really enjoying it. I was actually not performing well. It wasn't fair with me or my coworkers. So that's when I decided to quit. Um, it was a really tough choice, especially since so many people are struggling right now to find jobs, and I knew that it was very scary for me to actually quit my job and then try to find other jobs outside of it, especially being an immigrant, and always being reliant for a visa and that kind of stuff. So it was very very scary. But on the other hand, like, mental health, I realized how important that is, and taking time for yourself and making sure that you're doing things to take care of yourself. So
Yeah.
that's when I decided to quit and look for ways to heal myself.
So Roga is really a company that came out of your own personal experience and wanting to help others as well as yourself um, go through this experience in
Absolutely.
a much better way. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. I started going into neuroscience conventions to see what was out there. I started looking into brain stimulation, There is really, really cool gadgets and hardware that has been created. The technology is super solid. I'm also very pragmatic, so when it comes to clinical studies and understanding how this works, it's very, very important, as well as this whole entire world of mindfulness and routine to take care of yourself. So there is Eastern and Western medicine that has been created for this, that is actually um, being regulated, and it's working for many, many people. So I started going into this. I found out about a really, really cool brain stimulation technology that uses electrical therapy at a very, very low frequency, very, very safe, non-invasive way. And start going. I remember with a good friend of mine who's now head of engineering. We went to Lowe's. We bought a bunch of circuit boards, solder it in our kitchen, and started tampering with it, see what was working, what didn't, and learning about the science. And that's when I started going to neuroscience conventions. I met my co-founder Allison, who's a neuroscientist PhD. With She has worked in this specific technology for over 15 years. And she also has struggled with a lot of issues with her stress, giving her there's a lot of it due to Lyme disease and very, very severe stress disorders that I'm sure she'll be happy to talk about. And when we met, it was an instant click. She knew so much about the technology that we could use, and I knew so much about how to bring this type of products to market, like I did before in my career. And we started working together to create something for ourselves. This wasn't for anyone else. It was for me and for her, so that I could help calm myself down. That was the main thing. I wanted calm, and Roga in Hebrew actually means calm. That's where the name comes from, and and we started creating this routines where we would use the technology for brain stimulation. We would pair it with psychoeducation that we would find on YouTube and stuff like that, add some background music that we liked, and created this routine for ourselves. And we both managed to get off medication in that way, which was, and we came back to life. Alison also got she quit her job, and she joined the train of Roga and the rocket. And together we started the company, and we started to giving it to, at the beginning it was just friends that wanted to borrow it. It was huge, big prototype that it looked really, really ugly, but it worked. And some of our friends were like, wow, this really helped me. Maybe there is something to this. And we've been making sure that we have all the certification and regulatory stuff, that this is safe. So we got into electrical safety, and um, making sure that whomever uses it knows that this is safe to be used. And in that way, we created a beautiful product that you can use whenever stress and burnout comes out. And yeah, and now we just made it. I just have made it my purpose in life to help others dealing with stress and burnout. Because if I manage to overcome, and it's still a work in progress, but I managed to overcome it in the most part, with a daily routine that doesn't take more than 20 minutes of my day, then I'm sure some other people might be able to experience
Mm.
it.
I think, you hear a lot from founders about how often the products that they build that become incredible companies are really things that they built for themselves. And, I had other people in mind as a way of, could I help other people with this? But essentially it was a way of really helping themselves. And I think that's really true at Roga than, many other journeys I've heard, because you and Alison really were just cobbling stuff together. And you're not a neuroscientist, but Allison was. What occurred to you that it was really the path to go down to build a device? When did you really get stuck into this brain stimulation as one of the main things that you wanted to work on?
Yeah, I went into one of the neuroscience conference in Palo Alto when I met Allison. Um, and I we started talking about both our problems with stress. And she mentioned that there is a specific technology that uses brain stimulation, electrical pulses at a very, very low frequency that has been vastly studied for many years, but it hasn't seen a lot of innovation in the last couple of years. It's also extremely expensive to get it. And the form factor is it's not really meant for young people in 2022. It doesn't look like it. So her question was, I know how the science works really well because I've studied it in academics and I've brought to market other neurotech products for different disorders, but can you help me make this affordable for people? Can we make this something that people can try it, especially for the people that have suffered the most from stress, which is the younger population? Can we bring something to the younger population that looks trendy, that you can wear it in a Starbucks and not feel self-conscious about it? And can it be something that we can make it small enough and good looking, for people to really like using it? And then can we really help people
Mm,
with it? Something that the people can use it for 10-20 minutes a day and it still has very high efficacy rates. So that's when they draw my attention. Then whenever I started using it, and I saw the benefits in my day to day, when I came back to life from from a really dark place where I was struggling with stress, depression, and I was really not talking to with anyone. Um, and all of a sudden, for the first time in years, something worked.
mm. And so
Like
it
I
was,
came,
yeah. So it was you and Allison and Brian working on this together.
yeah,
Part of that.
Brian is an electrical and aerospace engineer, and he also helped me to put the first prototypes together. And then he became the head of engineering and helps us day to day improve the circuit boards and the firmware.
Mm. And I know I met you at the end of last year, 2021, and we started talking more seriously about working together after having, admired each other's work for a while. But
Right.
everything
So
changed a lot in 2022, didn't it?
yeah, so before that, when I met you, Ian was working at a really cool company, neurotech company, bringing to market a wearable device that to help people deal with, especially with focus and memory, and had such a great experience doing this. And I really wanted, from that moment, I knew that we were gonna be working together at some point. So I'm really excited to have you now part of the team, especially leading all of our marketing and growth process. It's been very humbling, especially since, with your experience to bringing this to market. And thank you
Thanks, Amy. Yeah,
for that.
it's exciting times, and I'm really excited to be part of the team too. Really inspired by the people that I work with, which is nice, and also by what we're doing. So here we are, kind of halfway through 2022. It's a bigger team
Mhm.
now. We've spent a long time working on the product. Could you tell us a bit
Yes.
about, kind of where you see us going in the next 6 months and where we are now?
Mhm. Yeah, so right now, since we got our certification in place, and we know this is safe to be used, so we're doing a very exclusive opening for some people for to take it for pre-order. So if you're listening to this, you can go to our website, rogalife.com. We're gonna put a few hundred devices out for purchase, and we're gonna be giving also a big 25% discount to the first served. And that's how we're gonna start. In the next few months, we'll start producing and releasing more and more units as we can scale our production. The most important part for me is to make sure that we're getting feedback from users. We have already done a user test with quite a lot of users giving us feedback and trying to improve the product as much as we can, and seeing incredible results when it comes to decrease of stress, and engagement with not only the wearable but also the content that we've created, which is very unique. The reason we have created that unique content is because we couldn't find it out there. We thought that people could use other apps for the content side, or just talk to the therapist, but there wasn't anything really out there for what we wanted it, which is pretty much a mixture between psychoeducation and Eastern medicine. So we created it ourselves. We have a really cool team of with a psychologist, psychiatrist, a mindfulness a coach, and a bunch of coaches from different places in the world creating the content. So in the next 6 months we're going to be releasing so right now we've been highlighted in a few really cool articles in Fast Company and Forbes. You can look for us there, and there's a few others on the way. The team is continue to grow, production continues to grow, and content continues to scale. And the goal in the next 6 months is to get it out there, to
Mm.
start helping people. I know it's a really rough time out there. If you look at what the CDC is saying, which is quite remarkable, is that stress and anxiety levels in the US in mid 2022 are higher than throughout the pandemic, just because of the economic situation. And that tells a lot, because economic turnout is even if it hurts more than financial than health warnings like COVID and stuff like that throughout the pandemic. So it is the reason we're launching now is to help people deal with and cope with the current situation. It's a very stressful time. So I'm sending all the best love and vibes to everyone out there who's dealing with stress and burnout, and we're here to help.
Mm.
Roga is a hub for people to deal with stress and burnout, and we want to bring this community into a place where we can help a lot of people and people helping each other. So that's our goal.
Exciting times. Really good to be able to help people in this delicate time. So just want to say thanks again, Ami, for sharing your personal experiences in particular, and kind of leading the way. We're going to be in this podcast over the next couple of weeks, each bearing our souls in the way that Ami has, a little bit to explain why we're doing what we're doing, and demonstrate that this is a company that's really built by people with stress and other problems like that, for people with stress and other problems like that. So thanks for joining us for our first podcast today. If you're interested in following up and paying attention to what we're up to, or even being one of the first people to grab one of those devices, you can find us at www.rogalife.com. And at rogalife.com, you can find out all about our product. You can pre-order, or you can just jump on our mailing list and stay in touch alongside other 15,000 people who've done that over the last couple of years. So thanks again, Ami. And thanks again, everyone who listened. We'll be in touch again soon.